I started another series. This one is called Mushoku Tensei. Mushoku Tensei is written by Refugin na Maganote. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. And then it's illustrated by Shirotaka. Mushoku Tensei originally started as a web novel. Apparently, the writer was reading another web novel called Re-Monster, and he learned about the website Shosei Tetsuka. Anyway, he was reading Re-Monster on there, learned about this website, read some other light novels, and then apparently he started writing and submitting to it. And then Mushoku Tensei became a light novel. Here we have Volume 1. Mushoku Tensei also has different adaptations. It's got an anime, which is really good, and what I started with. It has a manga, it's got video games, and it apparently has some manga spin-offs. It's got one called Roxy Gets Serious manga. Another one is Mushoku Tensei I'll Be Serious Even for Coma. And then a third spin-off, which is also a manga, Eris Sharpens Her Fangs. I've never read any of those. I've actually only just read this first volume, but I have seen the first 2 seasons of the anime. It's really freaking good. Cole was the one that got me into the anime and said that I should be reading the light novel as well because there's a lot that it leaves out, and it's really good, and I'm happy to report that he is correct. The writer of Mushoku Tensei was also inspired by Lucifer and the Biscuit Hammer and Parasite. I have read Parasite, and I can kind of see some of the similarities as far as like character growth and development. Really, really cool. We'll get into that a little bit later. Mushoku Tensei has 26 volumes in the light novel with 286 chapters. We have another friend that got Cole to watch the anime, and Cole really liked the anime, praised it up and down, told me I should watch it. I fell in love with it. I'm a sucker for fantasy, what can I say? And years later, he finally talked me into reading the light novel. I kind of jumped on this because the newest season of the anime had just finished a couple weeks ago or a couple months ago, I can't really remember, recently, and I was really sad. I wanted more of it, and I think that the anime has only covered like half of where the light novel is, and Cole has all of the light novel volumes, so what better time to jump in and start reading than now. So what the gist of this story is Mushoku Tensei is about a character that we don't even know his name. He's this fat, degenerate, broke, sad pity party of a human being. Right here, we get a back shot of him. He is a piece of crap, but he became a piece of crap because of just life. He was bullied in high school, so he kind of gave up. He was also very addicted to his computer and gaming and like all the sorts. Just a straight up dungeon lord, living in his dungeon, never leaves the house. He's like 34 or whatever. Piece of crap. His parents die. He's living in the house. His siblings hate him. They beat him up. They smash his stuff. One day, the fat guy's like, hey, maybe I should go try and do something. He leaves his house, gets hit by a car trying to save these kids. Boom. He gets reincarnated into a new world. He's actually reincarnated as this little boy here. His name is Rudius. Rudius, his parents, is Zenith and Paul. But he also lives with a maid named Lilia, who is the maid. Paul is a knight of noblehood, higher status, so him and his wife have pretty good money, and they live with Lilia, who is the maid. The fun thing about this story is that Rudius actually keeps his memories from his past life. And in lots of isekais, typically what happens is the character dies, they get incarnated into a new world, but they're usually like adults or they're older, and their previous life doesn't really matter. Whereas in Mushoku Tensei, Rudius, he gets reincarnated, but he also keeps his memories from his past life. And that's kind of the character development that he has to go through, is he still has to get past his past life, trying to overcome past trauma, but doing it in a new body, in a new world, around different people. Basically getting a restart at life. So Rudius, essentially keeping his memories from the past life, means that he's a little more mature and developed than a traditional kid. And throughout the beginning of this story, we see a lot of the characters' interactions with Rudius and how they go about interacting with him. Lilia is very like nervous slash skeptical around Rudius. He kind of creeps her out essentially because he's a little kid, 2 years old, and he's a 40-year-old man in the body of a child. So he's like staring at her creepily, oogling her, and he just does different things. Like Lilia would catch him reading books in one of the upstairs bedrooms in the attic. He's reading magical books and whatnot. As Rudius is reading these books, he actually develops really good magical skills. And this story has a very in-depth magic system that I'm not going to really break it down just because it's very in-depth. But it's really cool. It's really cool to see a magic system like that, which I honestly haven't really... I don't think I've read anything up to this point that was as descriptive with how the magic system works than Mushoku Tensei does. For example, when Rudius is learning how to shoot water balls out of his arm, it talks about how he can feel the blood and energy in his arm swelling up, and then the water eventually gets shot out. Apparently, Rudius is a really good mage. He can cast spells without using incantations. And eventually his parents find out that he can do magic, so they hire this magic tutor. Her name is Roxy. She is a mage. She comes to teach Rudius, and she finds out that Rudy can do magic without using incantations, and kind of blows her away. She was very skeptical to teach him at first because she's like, oh, well, every parent thinks their child is gifted. And then she meets Rudy and sees what he can do, and she's completely blown away. So then we get a few chapters of Rudy and Roxy, their relationship growing. Super fun, master and student. Rudius actually really likes Roxy, kind of has a thing for her. I mean, you got to remember that it's not just a 6-year-old boy. It's actually a 40-year-old man inside this body. But he gets really good with magic and really gets attached to Roxy too. It's super fun seeing their relationship grow. But one thing with this story, and as I was reading the wiki, the writer talks about why he did some of this, but there are parts that are like very perverted and almost uncomfortable to read at times, coming from Rudy's perspective, and it's like, why? And then reading the wiki, I found out that basically the writer wanted to show how gross and perverted and messed up and how much of a dumpster this guy before Rudy, whatever his name was how disgusting of a human he was. And it really is quite uncomfortable when you read it at times, but that again is part of the character development, I guess, is of overcoming what his past life was. Like there's a part where Rudy sees Roxy, because they all lived in the same house. Rudy sees Roxy sitting outside of Paul and Zenith's bedroom when they're doing the thing, and she's kind of she's doing her thing while watching these two do their thing, and Rudy catches them. It's kind of a weird thing. Anyway, it's stuff like that where you're like, dang, like this is intense, I guess, for lack of a better term. But as perverse and weird as the story gets at times, that is completely outshined with how much fun this book really is, going through everybody's different relationships. Like Paul and Rudy have a very interesting relationship. Paul's kind of a scumbag when it comes to women. At one point, Zenith announces that she's pregnant with obviously Paul's child, Rudy's sister, and everyone's happy. It's kind of a happy moment, and then not soon later, Lilia says, oh, I'm pregnant too. And then Paul's like, uh-oh. Yeah, that's probably my kid. So Zenith gets really mad, and Rudy is actually the one that he calms everybody down, talks everybody through it. And instead of kicking Lilia out or Zenith running away, they all end up staying together, and Paul essentially has 2 wives with 2 children on the way as well. At some point, Rudy and Roxy, she says, hey, I've pretty much taught you all I can. Pretty soon you're going to be better than me. So he has a little bit of a graduation with her. But the graduation actually is they have to leave the house. And up to this point, I think Rudy's 5. He has never left the house before. And Roxy is actually the one that gets Rudy to leave the house. This for me was the really cool character development part of the story, which is so unique, is even though Rudy's a small child, he's overcoming his past traumas as an adult. He was a shut-in when he was the fat slob in his past life that never left his house. He was bullied. There's lots of traumatic things that happened to him. So when Roxy takes Rudius out of the house, it is a very, very big deal for Rudy. And it means a lot to him. And that's kind of why he, I mean, not the only reason why he sees her as his master, but why he really quite cares for her. Eventually, Rudy meets this little boy named Sylphie. Or named Sylph, but it's actually not a little boy. Rudy just thinks it is. So for an entire year, Rudy's hanging out with Sylphie, thinking that Sylphie is a boy. And at some point, they were hanging out. They got rained on, I think, and they went back home to take a bath. Sylphie didn't want to, and Rudy's like, "What are you talking about? Let's just take a bath. You're gonna get cold. Your clothes are wet." So he like rips her clothes off and finds out that Sylphie's a girl. Very weird moment, but it's also a nice, cute moment between Paul and Rudy, because up to this point, Paul feels very inadequate as a parent, because it's like he's talking to a grown adult, even though Rudy's like 5 years old at the time. So Paul realizes, he's like, "Oh, yeah, I mean, it is smart and awesome as my son is, he's still just a naive little kid." And that was a big moment for them. Rudy saves Sylphie from bullies, and they become really good friends. Rudy starts teaching her magic along the way. Lots of fun seeing their relationship build and grow. One thing that I really like that this book does is if it ever changes the character's perspective, like right here, that's a scene. If it ever changes a character's perspective, it'll actually show their name. It'll be like, okay, now we're Paul's perspective, and then we'll go back to, now we're back to Rudius's perspective. So that's really fun. I really like that. Obviously, throughout the light novel, I think most light novels are this way, is there's some pictures, some artwork. Like here's Roxy when she first shows up to the house. Here's Rudius shooting his water balls, learning magic for the first time. So I really like that. Towards the end of the story, when we find out that Paul has impregnated both of his wives, I guess up to this point, they eventually have two little girls. They have one who is Norm, that's Zenith's daughter, and then they have another one. Her name is Aisha, and that is Lilia's daughter. After the kids are born, Rudy kind of talks to Paul where he's like, "Hey dude, like I kind of want to go to school." It was something that Roxy mentioned to Rudy, where she's like, "You could always go to a magic school and continue your training." Because Rudy for a couple years felt very stagnant. I think it's 2 years after Roxy leaves. So he's 7 years old at this point. Both of his sisters are born. His mom and maid, or second mom, they're getting along. They're doing their thing. And they're all kind of one big happy family. And then at the end of this volume, Rudy was like, "Hey Dad, I want to go to magic school, but can you also pay for Sylphie, because I want her to come with me?" And Paul's like, "Hey, we can't do that. Magic school's really expensive." But also in Paul's head, he's saying, Sylphie relies a lot on Rudy. Rudy is my son. He might be a womanizer when he grows older and break lots of hearts. I do not want him to crush Sylphie's heart, because Paul also is actually friends with Sylphie's dad. They do work together in the village. So Paul starts scheming, and at the end of this volume, what Paul does is he's training with Rudy outside. So Rudy's not only a mage, but he's also training in swordcraft because his dad is a master swordsman. So at the end of the volume, Paul attacks Rudy with a wooden sword, knocks him out, and then throws him in a carriage. And when Rudy wakes up, he is greeted with this ginormous, this monstrous-looking lady inside this carriage, very buff and mostly naked, and she has cat or dog ears. She's a beast lady with a tail. And her name is Ghislaine, or Ghislaine, however you want to say it, Ghislaine. I'm going to say Ghislaine, because I like that better. I think they called her the Sword King. Apparently she's just a master when it comes to swordsmanship. She also knew Paul. Paul wrote a letter to Rudy, kind of explaining what's going on. He's like, "Sorry, you probably hate me, but I think this is what's best for you." And as Rudy goes along reading the letter, he kind of understands Paul's perspective, and he's like, yeah, I guess. So where Rudy is going is to another kingdom where he is going to be teaching the princess that is at this kingdom. He's going to be tutoring her along with tutoring Ghislaine as well, teaching them math and language and all sorts of stuff. And so that really is where this volume ends. Rudy is going to this place, and in Paul's letter, he's like, hey, you're actually going to get paid for doing this, and it's going to be 5 years. And at the end of the 5 years, you're going to have enough money to pay for yours and Sylphie's tuition to go to the magic school. So Rudy is not going to see any of his family for 5 whole years, and that really is where the volume leaves off. We get a bonus chapter from Zenith's perspective, which is I enjoyed because we don't really get much of or with Zenith other than the chapter where we find out that Paul and Lilia were banging. That's pretty much all we got from Zenith. But the extra chapter is really cool. It kind of shows her perspective on how she met Paul, how she views Rudius and her relationship with him. It also goes into her side of how she felt going through the betrayal that she experienced and how she was this close to just either leaving with her babies or kicking Lilia out on the street because she was so angry. But once again, Rudy was the one that talked her down out of that. So anyway, it was really cool. I'm super excited to be reading this. It is, I love the anime. I'm really, really, really liking the light novel so far. It's very descriptive, very detailed. I love the character relationships, and it's really fun kind of like reading stuff that I've already seen, but also getting more details and getting a little bit of stuff that I maybe haven't seen because they haven't adapted everything. But anyway, that is it. That is Mushoku Tensei Volume 1. Like I had already mentioned, there are 26 of these. I am going to be reading all 26 of these. I'm super excited that there's that much content for me to read. It gives me a lot more story to go. So with that is kind of my thoughts on Mushoku Tensei Volume 1. Let me know what your guys' thoughts are in the comments down below. Let me know if there's other series that I should be reading that I could talk about. Anyway, thank you guys for watching, and as always, keep it rad.